The jungle felt alive. It wasn't just the sound of unseen creatures, or the constant weight of the damp air pressing down on him. It was something deeper, something wrong. Silas Holt wiped the sweat trickling down his brow, his machete heavy in his gloved hand. The blade sliced through thick vines hanging like ropes from the skeletal arms of gnarled trees. A breeze stirred, cold and unnatural, carrying whispers he couldn't place. He froze mid-step, listening. Nothing. It had been days since he'd seen another soul. Days since the mercenaries who guided him had fled, muttering about the cursed green. But Silas hadn't come this far to turn back. The jungle had secrets, ancient and untouched, and secrets were worth fortunes. That's what he told himself. Silas adjusted his backpack and moved deeper into the thicket, boots squelching in mud. Focus on the prize. He was an explorer by trade, though adventurer had a better ring to it on his published books and interviews. Once a respected academic, he had traded lecture halls for forgotten ruins and cryptic artifacts. This current expedition, it wasn't funded by a university. A private investor had pointed him here, promising an anomaly unlike anything on Earth. Silas thought it was another tall tale, but now, as the shadows around him thickened and the air grew colder, he wasn't so sure. The clearing appeared without warning. Silas stepped through a wall of hanging moss, and the dense green opened into a small patch of barren ground bathed in pale moonlight. It was wrong. Dead leaves scattered the ground, the grass here brittle and gray. A sudden cold settled into his bones, a biting chill that didn't belong in this part of the world. Then he saw her. Silas froze, blinking, as if his mind needed a moment to catch up. The figure stood motionless at the center of the clearing, bathed in silver light. A woman or something close. Her skin was a deep violet hue, smooth yet somehow luminous. Etched into her skin were patterns that pulsed faintly with light, shifting like constellations alive with purpose. She was barefoot, the dirt unmarked beneath her feet, as though the earth dared not remember her touch. Her face, alien and hauntingly beautiful, was framed by long strands of silver-white hair that cascaded down her shoulders. She was tall, slender, but not fragile. There was a quiet strength in the way she held herself, despite the violent shivers racking her frame. Her eyes, impossibly large, and a pale silver that nearly matched her hair, locked onto Silas. She watched him with a mix of fear and something unreadable. Silas gripped his machete tighter, his pulse hammering in his chest. "Jesus," he whispered under his breath. The alien girl flinched at the sound of his voice, her glowing markings flaring brighter before dimming again. Silas realized he was holding his breath. What the hell is she? He had seen ruins built by forgotten civilizations, deciphered relics that shouldn't exist, but nothing had prepared him for this. Silas lowered his blade carefully, every instinct screaming caution. "Hey," he said softly, as if speaking to a wounded animal. His voice, rough and low, felt painfully loud against the silence of the clearing. "It's all right. I won't hurt you." The girl took a step back, arms wrapping tightly around herself. Her bare shoulders quivered in the cold. Silas saw the mist of her breath in the moonlight. "She's freezing," he realized, something twisting painfully in his gut. His mind raced. Was she real? Some kind of hallucination brought on by exhaustion? If she wasn't, how had she gotten here so alone, so exposed? Silas felt a strange pang of compassion, cutting through the numb disbelief clogging his brain. Her eyes watched him still, cautious and sharp, but beneath her wariness, he saw something else, something helpless. Silas let out a slow breath and turned his palm toward her, showing he was unarmed. "I have shelter. It's warm. You can come with me." He pointed back the way he came, toward the distant shadow of his tent, hidden in the underbrush. She didn't move. Silas stepped back once, then twice, keeping his movements deliberate. "I'm not a threat," he said. His voice softened, the hard edge of survival instinct easing. "You're freezing out here. Let me help." For a heartbeat, she remained still. Then, tentatively, she took a step toward him. It was small, barely perceptible, but it shattered the tension locking them both in place. Silas turned slowly and began walking back the way he'd come, refusing to look back. If he spooked her now, she'd vanish into the darkness. By the time he reached the tent, the jungle had grown unnervingly quiet. Silas ducked inside, switched on the small heater, and unrolled a spare blanket. The tent's interior filled with a soft orange glow, chasing away the chill. Outside, he heard the faint rustle of movement. The canvas door shifted, and Silas looked up. She was there. The alien girl lingered at the entrance, her glowing markings dimmed but still pulsing faintly. She stepped inside like a shadow slipping through cracks in the light. Up close, she seemed even more extraordinary. The violet hue of her skin appeared almost translucent under the glow of the heater, as if her body carried the remnants of starlight. Her movements were fluid but unfamiliar, her head tilting with subtle bird-like precision. Silas handed her the blanket. "Here, take this." She didn't understand his words, but the gesture was clear. Hesitantly, she accepted it, fingers brushing against his. Her touch was unnaturally cold, but her skin felt soft, almost too soft to belong to something living. Silas swallowed hard. She wrapped the blanket around herself, sitting cross-legged across from him on the tent floor. The heater's warmth spread between them, and for the first time, her shivering stopped. Silas watched her, his thoughts warring with each other. Was she some advanced species, the remnants of an ancient alien race? Or worse, was she not the only one here? Her silver eyes met his, and Silas felt pinned in place. There was something aware in that gaze, something unspoken that made him feel far smaller than he had in years. "Who are you?" he muttered, almost to himself. She blinked slowly, the patterns on her skin pulsing brighter before dimming again, as though answering a question he hadn't asked. Silas didn't know what to make of it, but he couldn't tear his eyes away. He had come to the jungle chasing myths, relics, and fortune. Instead, he found her. The jungle outside murmured faintly, the sound low and restless. Silas glanced at the canvas door, his stomach turning uneasily. Was it watching? The girl shifted slightly, curling the blanket tighter around herself, and Silas turned his attention back to her. For now, the mysteries of the jungle could wait. Whatever this moment was, whatever she was, it felt fragile, delicate, like a candle flickering in the wind. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Silas felt responsible for keeping it lit. Inside the tent, the air felt warmer now, though the tension still sat thick and heavy. The soft hum of the heater pushed back the unnatural cold, but Silas couldn't shake the feeling that the jungle outside hadn't forgotten them. It lingered, just beyond the thin canvas walls, waiting. Silas sat against the tent's inner lining, his breathing measured. Across from him, the alien girl sat folded into herself, the blanket draped over her shoulders like a dark shroud. Her violet skin still shimmered faintly, pulsing with light along those strange markings, a slow rhythm, like the heartbeat of a distant star. She was silent, always silent, and yet her presence filled the space, alive and magnetic. Silas studied her carefully. She seemed so human at first glance, her delicate shoulders, the curve of her collarbone peeking out where the blanket slipped, but every detail revealed something impossibly alien. Her silver hair cascaded in soft waves, falling over her face as she tucked her knees to her chest. And then there were her eyes, impossibly large, silver and liquid, as though holding the reflection of entire galaxies. The silence between them stretched, thick as molasses. Silas cleared his throat, trying to shake off the discomfort pressing on his chest. "You're warmer now?" he asked softly, tapping the heater with the edge of his boot. It buzzed reassuringly, the sound of small comfort. The girl tilted her head slightly. She didn't answer, but her silver eyes lingered on him, studying him with the same curiosity he felt for her. A faint hum, deep and melodious, escaped her throat. The sound startled Silas, vibrating through the stillness like a bell struck in an empty cathedral. It wasn't speech, but it was something. "You understand me, don't you?" he murmured. The girl's markings flared faintly in response. Silas didn't know what it meant, but his gut told him it was more than coincidence. She wasn't just mimicking his movements or reacting instinctively. She was aware, maybe more aware than he was. Silas exhaled slowly, running a hand through his damp hair. "You're not from here, that's obvious," he said, though he doubted she understood. "But how the hell did you end up in a place like this?" She didn't answer, but her gaze softened. The glow of her markings dimmed, and Silas swore he saw something like sadness flicker across her face. He shifted, reaching for the notebook he'd abandoned earlier. He flipped to a clean page and began sketching again, this time slower, his strokes careful. He started with her eyes, those haunting, otherworldly eye sand, the contours of her face, the sharp angle of her jaw, and the gentle slope of her nose. When he finished, he turned the notebook toward her. "This is you," he said simply. The girl blinked, silver lashes casting faint shadows across her cheeks. She leaned forward slightly, her silver hair spilling over her shoulder as she studied the drawing. Her fingers reached out hesitantly, tracing the page. Silas swallowed as her fingertips brushed the surface, light as air. But there was a faint pull, like the static before a storm. "You're real," he said softly, the words slipping out before he could stop them. He almost didn't believe it himself. Her eyes flicked up to meet his, and in that moment, something shifted. It was subtle, like the hush before rain. The space between them suddenly felt too small, the warmth of the tent too heavy. Silas's heart picked up, and he wasn't sure why. He'd seen many strange and dangerous things in his life, but this she was something he couldn't define. She tilted her head again, observing him, and Silas realized she was watching him the same way he watched her. Curious, searching. "Are you alone?" he asked, the question barely audible. The alien girl didn't move, but her gaze darkened. Her lips parted slightly, as if she might speak, but no sound came. Instead, she reached toward him, her movements slow, deliberate. Silas stiffened, his breath hitching as her hand touched his chest, barely there, like a whisper of wind. His heartbeat thundered under her palm, his skin prickling from the contact. The glowing patterns on her body brightened, spreading up her wrist toward her slender arm, like veins filling with light. Her silver eyes narrowed slightly, focused on where her hand met him. It was as though she were listening to him, feeling something deep beneath the surface. Silas couldn't move, couldn't think. Her touch sent warmth curling through him, stronger than the heater's feeble glow. It wasn't unnatural, it wasn't wrong. It felt like something more. "Hey," he whispered, his voice hoarse, though he didn't pull away. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer. She leaned in closer, so close he could see the faint rise and fall of her chest beneath the blanket, the soft glow of her markings illuminating the air between them. Her scent reached him faint, like rain-soaked leaves, and something sweeter, something he couldn't place. Silas's pulse quickened, and he wasn't sure if it was fear or something deeper. Every rational part of his mind screamed that this wasn't right, that she wasn't human, but another part, something instinctive, told him not to pull away. Her other hand rose, brushing the side of his face, her fingers impossibly soft and cool against his rough skin. Silas swallowed hard, the space between them electric. He searched her gaze for answers, for anything, but all he found was the same look she'd given him before. Curiosity, sadness, and something deeper need. Time seemed to fracture. The tension between them tightened like a coil pulled taut. Silas didn't know who moved first, if he leaned in, or if she did, but suddenly, there was no space left at all. Her lips met his soft and hesitant hand. Silas forgot everything else. The jungle outside, the cold, the humid, all melted away. Her kiss was strange and familiar all at once, like tasting starlight. The warmth of her skin deepened where they touched, her markings flaring brighter as though she were responding to him. Silas felt the hum again. But this time, it wasn't outside. It was inside him, vibrating through his bones, his veins, his very being. The world narrowed to this momento. The silence outside was heavy and unnatural. It seeped through the canvas walls of the tent like a slow-moving fog, crawling into Silas's chest and sitting there, cold and foreboding. He sat upright, fully awake now, every nerve in his body screaming at him that something had changed. The girl was gone. The blanket she'd been wrapped in lay crumpled near where she had been sitting. Its warmth still lingered faintly against his fingertips as he reached for it, his pulse quickening. The heater's hum had long since faded. The air inside the tent was frigid, colder than it had any right to be. Silas cursed under his breath and grabbed his machete before stepping outside. The jungle was wrong. It wasn't the usual dark, chaotic cacophony of life. No insect song, no rustling leaves. The air was too still, the shadows too deep. The mist had returned, curling low over the ground like smoke from a smoldering fire. Silas's breath fogged in front of him, and every exhale felt like a warning and intrusion into the jungle's newfound silence. Then he saw Ita faint glow deeper among the trees, soft and pulsing. His jaw tightened. It was her. Silas moved cautiously, boots pressing into the damp earth with deliberate care. His machete was gripped tight in his hand, its familiar weight grounding him even as his instincts buzzed with unease. The glow ahead grew stronger, flickering like a beacon between the gaps in the branches. He stepped into the clearing and stopped dead. The alien girl knelt at the base of an enormous tree, her silver hair cascading over her face like a pale curtain. Her markings glowed brighter now, intricate veins of light spidering across her violet skin. She had her palm pressed flat against the tree's gnarled bark, her head tilted slightly as though listening to something only she could hear. Silas swallowed, his voice low and tight. "What are you doing?" The girl's head snapped up, her silver eyes locking onto his. For a moment, she didn't move. Then, as though deciding he wasn't a threat, she lowered her gaze back to the tree. Her markings flared brighter alive, their glow spreading into the bark, where it traveled along dark, spiraling grooves Silas hadn't noticed before. The tree wasn't natural. Silas edged closer, his heart hammering. The grooves in the bark formed symbols, ancient and jagged, and the deeper he looked, the clearer they became, like a language written into the flesh of the tree itself. The patterns were unmistakable. They were the same as the ones that pulsed on the girl's skin. "What the hell is this place?" Silas murmured, half to himself. The girl stood slowly, her gaze shifting from the tree back to him. She moved like a whisper, graceful and deliberate. Her markings rippled faintly, the glow subsiding slightly as though her energy had dimmed. Silas stepped closer, his instincts screaming at him to turn back, but curiosity pushed him forward. He reached out, brushing his fingertips against the carved bark. The grooves were cold, impossibly so, as though the tree's roots reached into the frozen depths of the earth. "Is this where you came from?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "Is this what you were looking for?" The girl didn't answer. She never did. Boot. Something in her eyes shifted. Sadness. Resolve. She stepped closer, her gaze locked on his, and reached out her hand. Silas's breath hitched as her cool fingers touched his chest, right over his heart. The world fell away. A wave of light exploded behind his eyes, and suddenly, he was somewhere else. The jungle was gone. He stood in a vast expanse of land, gray and lifeless, its soil cracked and scorched beneath an iron sky. Mountains loomed on the horizon, their peaks fractured and glowing faintly as if broken from the inside out. Silas turned, his mind reeling. In the center of the expanse lay a ship, massive and half-buried, its metal surface fractured and worn, like the carcass of some great beast. The symbols, the same as hers, were etched across its hull, glowing faintly as though alive. Silas staggered forward, his boots sinking into the strange earth. He could feel the hum vibrating in his bones now, deeper and louder, as though the ship itself were breathing. Shapes moved within its broken wall, shadows without form, flickering at the edges of his vision. Then he heard it, a sound that rose from everywhere and nowhere, low and rumbling, a voice too vast to comprehend. It wasn't words, it was a feeling. Loss, hunger, something old and forgotten, trying to wake. The vision shattered. Silas fell to his knees in the clearing, gasping for breath. The girl stood above him, her hand dropping back to her side. Her silver eyes were steady, searching his face as though waiting for him to understand. What was that?" Silas choked out, his head pounding. "What did you show me?" She didn't answer. She only looked at him, her markings glowing faintly now, as though the vision had drained her. Silas pushed himself to his feet, legs trembling beneath him. His mind raced, trying to make sense of what he'd seen. "That was your world, wasn't it?" he said quietly. "That ship, that place, it's all connected to you." The girl turned her head slightly, as though listening to something in the distance. Then Silas heard it too, a deep rumble. It rose from beneath the earth, vibrating through the soles of his boots. The jungle trembled around them, branches groaning as though pulled taut. Silas spun toward the sound, his chest tightening as the same hum he'd felt before, grew louder, more alive. The ground cracked. Roots burst from the earth, twisting and writhing like serpents. The tree shuddered violently, its markings flaring brighter than ever before. Silas grabbed the girl's arm, yanking her back as the roots split the ground apart, blackened soil spilling into the air like smoke. "We need to move," Silas said sharply, his voice cutting through the chaos. The girl didn't resist. Together they stumbled away from the tree, the earth cracking open behind them. Silas glanced back once and froze. The tree had changed. Its trunk had split apart, and something was emerging. A shape, formless and vast, coiled like smoke through the air. Its body glowed faintly, matching the girl's markings. But it wasn't alive enough like she was. It was something else. Something wrong. Silas's stomach turned. Whatever had been buried here, it was awake now. The girl pulled at his arm, her strength startling. Silas followed, his boots pounding against the earth as they fled back into the shadows of the jungle. Behind them, the hum grew louder, echoing through the trees like a heartbeat. Silas didn't dare look back again. Branches whipped against his face, roots clawed at his boots, but he didn't stop. The alien girl ran ahead of him, moving faster than any human could. Her markings glowed faintly in the dark, lighting their path as they pushed deeper into the trees. When they finally stopped, the hum had faded, though the air still felt heavy charged with something unseen. Silas collapsed against a tree trunk, his chest heaving. The girl stood a few paces ahead, her gaze fixed on the direction they'd come from. "That thing," Silas said between breaths, his voice hoarse. "You woke it up, didn't you?" The girl turned to face him. For the first time, she looked afraid. Silas dragged a hand down his face, his mind still spinning. He looked at her, this strange, glowing being who had somehow survived whatever hell she'd come from, and knew one thing for certain. They weren't alone out here anymore. And whatever had woken up was only just beginning. Silas Holt crouched low beneath a massive tree, his back pressed against its cold, ridged bark. The jungle had fallen silent again, but this silence was different. Teet was watching. He could feel it, the way every shadow stretched a little too far. Every rustling leaf whispered secrets meant for no one. The alien girl stood a few paces ahead, her silver hair luminous in the faint moonlight filtering through the canopy. Her violet skin glowed softly, her markings subdued but flickering in slow, deliberate patterns. She was still, her sharp silver eyes scanning the dark as though waiting for something to show itself. "You're going to have to explain this eventually," Silas said, his voice hoarse, "because I don't think I'll live through another surprise." The girl glanced at him over her shoulder. She didn't respond. She never did, but something about her expression was different now. It was focused, determined. Like she knew what lay ahead, even if he didn't. Silas shifted uncomfortably, gripping his machete tighter as he surveyed the jungle. The cold hadn't left. It pressed down on him like a weight, the mist slithering between his boots like a living thing. "What was that thing?" he demanded again, though the words felt hollow. The tree, the humming, that thing. She didn't flinch. Instead, she took a step closer to him, her eyes locked onto his. Silas held his breath as she knelt, her slender fingers brushing the earth. The markings on her arms flared brighter. They didn't flicker randomly anymore. They pulsed in a rhythm steady, deliberate, like an ancient code brought to life. Silas frowned, his heartbeat slowing in time with the glow. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer, but this time he didn't need her to. The ground shuddered beneath them. Faintly at first, like the quiet tremor before a storm. But it grew louder, deeper, until it felt as though something vast and unseen was moving beneath the soil. Silas staggered back, his breathing quickening. "Enough of this," he barked, slamming the machete into a nearby root. The clang of metal against wood rang sharp in the heavy air. "Whatever you're waking up, stop it before." He broke off. The jungle around them was shifting. The mist had thickened into an opaque wall, the trees beyond its edge fading into obscurity. The roots beneath his boots trembled, curling and uncurling like restless fingers. Silas's pulse thundered in his ears. Then the girl stood. She turned to face him, her gaze calm yet unrelenting. Slowly she extended her hand toward him, palm open and glowing faintly. Silas hesitated. "What do you want me to do?" Her eyes didn't waver. She simply stood there, arm outstretched, waiting. Silas's chest tightened. He didn't trust her, how could he? But he'd seen what she was capable of. He'd seen that thing rise from the earth, and it was hunting her. Hesitantly, he reached out and placed his hand in hers. The moment their skin touched, the world split apart. Light exploded around them, bright and searing, the glow bleeding into the mist like fire spreading through paper. Silas squeezed his eyes shut, gritting his teeth as waves of energy surged through him, hot and unrelenting. When the light dimmed, Silas opened his eyes. His breath caught in his throat. They were no longer in the jungle. The trees were gone, replaced by a vast expanse of glowing earth, the ground beneath their feet rippling like liquid light. The sky above was black, no stars, no moon, just an endless abyss. Silas turned in a slow circle, his boots leaving faint impressions on the glowing surface. The alien girl stood beside him, unbothered by the shift in reality. "What the hell is this?" Silas whispered, his voice shaking. The girl raised her hand, and Silas followed her gaze. In the distance, a structure loomed, an enormous archway formed from the same dark material as the ship in his vision. Its surface shimmered with etched symbols, identical to the ones on her skin. The hum was louder here, vibrating through the air in low, resonant waves. "You brought me here?" Silas turned to her, his anger bubbling up through his confusion. "Why? What is this place?" For the first time, she stepped toward him. Slowly, deliberately, she placed her hand on his chest again. Silas stiffened at the contact, but this time there was no pain, only a strange warmth spreading through him. Her silver eyes softened, and then finally, she spoke. "Help." The word was a whisper, faint but undeniable. It wasn't just a request, it was a plea. Silas froze. The single word hung between them like a weight. You can talk?" Her markings flared brighter, her gaze locked onto his. "Help," she repeated, her voice lilting, strange but achingly human. Silas swallowed hard, his mind racing. "Help you how? Against that thing? What is it?" She turned her head toward the archway, the symbols pulsing brighter as though in response to her gaze. The hum deepened, growing more urgent, vibrating through Silas's chest. He understood then, whatever was hunting her, whatever had woken up back in the jungle, was connected to this. "That thing," he said slowly, piecing the thoughts together. "It's tied to this place. To you?" The girl nodded once, her silver hair brushing her shoulders. Silas exhaled shakily, running a hand through his damp hair. "So, what happens if we go through that?" He gestured toward the archway, his voice low. The girl turned to him, her silver eyes unblinking. She didn't need to say they already knew. Whatever lay on the other side of that archway would either save them or destroy them. Silas clenched his fists, his gaze shifting from the girl to the distant structure. The hum pounded through his body like a war drum. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel like an explorer. He felt like a pawn in something far larger than himself. But when he looked back at the alien girl, the quiet desperation hidden beneath her otherworldly calm, he felt something else. Responsibility. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady. "I'll help you. But I need you to tell me what's on the other side." The girl hesitated. Her gaze flickered toward the archway, then back to him. "Home," she whispered. Silas's chest tightened. She turned and began walking toward the archway, her glowing markings spreading light across the endless dark. Silas took a deep breath, his muscles tense. For a moment, he stood there, staring at her fading silhouette. Then he followed. As they neared the archway, the hum grew deafening. Silas gritted his teeth, the vibration crawling through his bones, shaking him from the inside out. The structure towered over them now, its surface shifting like oil as the symbols flared brighter and brighter. The girl stepped through first. Silas hesitated, his pulse thundering in his ears. He looked back once, toward the endless glowing field behind him, then forward again. Whatever lay beyond, there was no turning back. With one last breath, he stepped through the threshold. Silas stepped through the archway, and reality splintered. A blinding light consumed everything, hot, disorienting, as though every atom in his body had been torn apart and thrown across the stars. His senses spun wildly. The roar of silence, the pressure of emptiness, the distant hum vibrating in his bones like a distant heartbeat. He couldn't tell if he was falling or floating, suffocating or drowning. Then, the light shattered, and the world slammed back into focus. Silas hit solid ground on his hands and knees, gasping for breath. The air was sharp and cold, cutting through his lungs like shards of glass. His vision swam before settling, and what he saw stole the breath he had left. The sky above him was a swirling violet olive, rippling with light like the surface of a distant ocean. No stars, no moon, only infinite motion. The land stretched endlessly, carved into jagged forms that seemed natural and unnatural at once, like mountains made of glass and shadow. Rivers of luminescent liquid carved glowing paths through the landscape, their light pulsing faintly in rhythm with his own heart. Silas stood shakily, his boots pressing against the ground that shimmered and flexed as though it were breathing. He looked down, half expecting to see his reflection in the earth's surface, but it absorbed his gaze like ink swallowing water. Beside him, the alien girl rose slowly. Her silver hair drifted weightlessly around her shoulders, and her violet skin glowed brighter now, alive with energy. The patterns etched into her skin blazed with light, synchronizing with the glowing rivers in the distance. This place, wherever it was, recognized her. Silas turned to her, his voice hoarse. "Where the hell are we?" She tilted her head slightly, her silver eyes locked on the horizon. Her lips parted as she whispered the answer. "Home." The word echoed in the stillness, soft but heavy, carrying something ancient. Silas turned, following her gaze to what she saw. In the distance, rising against the sky, like an obsidian monolith, was the structure. It loomed impossibly large, its dark surface reflecting the glowing landscape around it. Symbols like the ones on her skin covered its surface, pulsing as though the structure itself were alive. "Your home?" Silas asked, his brows furrowing as he tried to take in the enormity of it all. The girl nodded, but her gaze remained fixed on the monolith. Her markings flared softly, and Silas knew she felt its pull as deeply as he did. A chill crawled up Silas's spine. "This place," he murmured. "It's broken, isn't it?" The girl didn't answer, but she didn't need to. Everything about this world felt fractured. It was like standing in the ruins of something once perfect, a land abandoned by its creators, left to wither under a sky that no longer watched. Silas shook his head, trying to focus. "All right, you wanted to come here, and we're here. But what's waiting for us in that thing?" He gestured to the distant monolith, its edges rippling like molten shadow. The girl turned to face him, and for the first time, Silas saw something raw and human in her silver gaze. Fear. Before he could speak again, a faint sound rippled through the air. Silas froze. It was low and hollow, almost like a distant wind, but it carried with it a familiar vibration. The hum. His pulse quickened. No, not here. The girl's markings brightened abruptly, her body snapping into tension. She turned her head sharply toward the horizon, where the land seemed to ripple unnaturally. Silas squinted, his stomach turning. The ground wasn't moving. Something was rising from its shapes, dark and amorphous, twisting into life like shadows tearing themselves free. The hum grew louder. Silas grabbed the girl's wrist. "Run!" They sprinted across the landscape, the air thickening as though it resisted them. Silas's boots sank slightly with each step, the ground flexing under his weight. He glanced back over his shoulder and felt his chest seize. The shadows were following. They had no solid form, just blackness, liquid and alive, spreading across the earth like a stain. The hum emanated from them, vibrating the air with a low, relentless growl. Shapes twisted within the dark, like something trying to escape its own body. Silas pushed himself harder, his breath ragged, as they neared the glowing rivers. The girl ran ahead of him, her movements graceful and fluid. Her markings pulsed brighter, sending flashes of light across the ground as though guiding their path. "What are those things?" Silas shouted, his voice ripped apart by the wind. The girl didn't answer, but she turned sharply toward the nearest river of light. Without hesitation, she leaped across it, landing softly on the other side. Silas skidded to a stop, his boots nearly sliding into the glowing liquid. It was beautiful, alive, vibrant, but something about it felt wrong. "Are you kidding me?" Silas muttered, staring at the impossibly wide river. The shadows closed in behind him. Silas swore under his breath, gritted his teeth, and jumped. For a moment, he hung in the air, his heart lurching into his throat. Then his boots struck solid ground on the other side, and he stumbled forward, landing hard on his knees. He looked up, breathless, to see the girl waiting for him, her markings glowing faintly in the dim light. The shadows halted at the river's edge, their forms shuddering violently as though repelled. Silas blinked, wiping sweat from his brow.
"They can't cross?"
The girl shook her head, her eyes narrowing. The shadows seethed, swirling together into something larger, something aware. The hum grew deafening, vibrating through Silas's bones until he thought they might crack. Then the girl stepped forward. Her markings blazed to life, and the river of light beneath her flared in response. She raised her hand, and the hum faltered, the shadows pulling back slightly as though recoiling from her power. Silas watched in awe. She's controlling it. But it was temporary. The shadows pushed forward again, their form shifting into something darker, hungrier. Silas knew they couldn't stay here. "The monolith," he said, standing shakily. "We have to get to it. Now." The girl turned, her expression resolute, and they ran. The river stretched alongside them, its light flickering erratically, as though struggling to keep the shadows at bay. Silas's legs burned, but he didn't slow. The monolith loomed closer now, its surface impossibly smooth and dark, the pulsing symbols growing brighter as they approached. Finally, they reached its base. Up close, it was even more massive, towering so high it seemed to disappear into the violet sky. The girl moved to a panel set into the stone, her glowing hand pressing against it. The symbols shifted, rippling outward like waves. Silas's chest heaved as he looked back. The shadows were surging again, their edge pressing against the river like a breaking wave. "Hurry!" The girl's markings flared in response, her focus unshakable as the monolith began to open. Silas shielded his eyes as a beam of light split the structure's surface, revealing a vast entrance carved into its depths. The girl turned to him, her silver eyes bright with purpose. Silas didn't hesitate. He followed her inside. As the entrance sealed behind them, the hum outside disappeared, replaced by an eerie stillness. Silas collapsed against the smooth wall, his chest rising and falling. "We made it," he said, his voice rough. "We actually?" The girl stepped ahead of him, her gaze fixed on the chamber before them. Silas forced himself to his feet and turned to see what had captured her attention. At the center of the chamber was a pedestal. Floating above it, encased in a sphere of shimmering energy, was a key. It wasn't metal or stone, but something else entirely alive, pulsing with the same energy that lit her skin. Silas's eyes narrowed. "That's what we came for, isn't it?" The girl stepped forward, her markings glowing brighter with every step. Silas felt the weight of the moment settle over him like a shroud. Whatever lay ahead, whatever that key unlocked, it was the answer to everything, or the end of it. Silas's boots echoed softly against the polished floor of the chamber. The air inside the monolith was heavy, charged with an energy that vibrated beneath his skin like an unseen current. The glow from the girl's markings lit the space around them, a stark contrast to the surrounding darkness. The vastness of the chamber was disorienting, its smooth walls stretched so far and high that they seemed to blend into infinity. At the center of it all, the key floated, suspended above a pedestal of dark stone. Silas couldn't tear his eyes away from it. It pulsed like a beating heart, its surface shifting and shimmering as though made of liquid light. Its patterns intricate and alive matched the girl's glowing markings perfectly. Silas exhaled shakily. "What is that thing?" The girl moved forward, her footsteps silent. Her silver hair drifted weightlessly, as though the air around her were different, her violet skin glowing brighter with every step. She stopped just short of the pedestal, staring at the key with something like reverence. Silas tightened his grip on his machete, though the weapon felt absurdly useless in a place like this. "Hey," he said cautiously, stepping closer. "Before you touch it, I need to know what happens next." The girl turned to him, her silver eyes meeting his. Her expression was calm but resolute. She raised her hand, fingers tracing the outline of the key's glow as though feeling its energy. "Restore," she whispered. Silas frowned. "Restore? Restore what? This world?" She nodded once. But something in her eye, something deeper unsettled him. "What's the cost?" Silas pressed, his voice sharper now. "You don't fix something like this without paying a price? What happens to you?" The girl hesitated. Her gaze flickered to the key, then back to him. The markings on her skin pulsed faintly, a slower rhythm now, as though she were trying to explain without words. Silas felt a chill crawl up his spine. "It's you, isn't it?" he muttered. "You're part of this place. That key, the monolith very thing here, is tied to you." The girl's markings flared brightly in response, and Silas understood. "You activate it," he said softly, realization settling in his chest like a stone. "But it takes you to do it." The girl looked at him, her expression unchanging. She stepped closer to the pedestal, and Silas's pulse spiked. "Wait!" he barked, his voice echoing through the chamber. "There's got to be another way." She stopped, staring at him silently. Her silver eyes were unreadable, but he saw it, the quiet resolve, the acceptance of something inevitable. Silas took a shaky breath, his thoughts racing. "No," he said, shaking his head. "You didn't bring me all this way just to watch you die. You can't." "Protect," she whispered. Silas froze. The word lingered in the air, soft but final. The ground trembled beneath them, faint at first but growing stronger. Silas staggered, his instincts roaring to life. A low hum filled the chamber, vibrating through the walls like the sound of an engine roaring to life. The key flared brighter, its glow illuminating the darkness with violent intensity. "Damn it," Silas growled, his voice raw. "You don't have to do this." But she wasn't listening. She stepped forward, her hand reaching for the key. Her markings blazed with light, spreading across her body, in a rhythm that matched the pulsing energy of the room. The hum grew louder, deafening now, shaking the ground beneath them as the chamber itself seemed to awaken. Silas lunged for her, his hand outstretched. "Don't!" The moment her fingers brushed the key, everything exploded. A shock wave of energy erupted from the pedestal, knocking Silas off his feet and slamming him into the cold stone floor. Light consumed everything, a blinding, radiant force that burned through his vision and pounded through his skull like a storm. Silas gasped, his chest heaving as he forced himself to sit up. The girl stood at the center of the light, her body aglow, her markings burning brighter than ever before. The energy surrounding her rippled outward, carving patterns into the air, twisting and warping the very fabric of reality. Silas forced himself to his feet, shielding his eyes from the overwhelming brilliance.
"You don't have to do this,"
he shouted again, his voice hoarse.
"You brought me here for a reason."
"Let me help you." The girl turned to him, her silver eyes softening. She opened her mouth, as though to speak, but before the words could escape, the light surged again. Silas cried out as the force pressed against him, threatening to knock him down. The chamber trembled. The hum had become a roar, echoing through every surface, every molecule. The monolith groaned, its dark stones splitting apart as cracks of light spread across it like veins. Silas turned, his stomach sinking as the shadows began to appear against those dark, amorphous shapes he'd seen outside. The creatures were here. "No, no, no, no," Silas muttered, spinning back to the girl. "It's not enough, is it? That's why you brought me." The girl's markings pulsed wildly now, flickering like a star on the brink of collapse. Her body trembled under the strain, but she remained standing, her hand pressed firmly against the key. Silas felt the truth clawing at the edge of his mind, sharp and undeniable. She couldn't finish this alone. He stumbled forward, the force of the energy pushing back against him like a hurricane. "Tell me what to do," he roared, his voice breaking. The girl turned to him one last time. Her markings dimmed slightly, just enough to let him see the faint smile on her lips. Together. Silas understood. He forced his way to her side, his entire body screaming in protest. The energy was relentless, tearing at his clothes, at his skin, at his very being. But he didn't stop. He reached out, his hand trembling as he pressed it against the key beside hers. The energy surged. Silas screamed as the force ripped through him, burning through his veins like liquid fire. He could feel every part of this broken world, every fragment of its pain, its loss, its desperate need to be whole. It roared through him, a symphony of light and sound and fury. And at the center of it all, he felt her. The girl's energy surrounded him, her presence steady and unyielding. Together, they poured everything they had into the key. The chamber erupted with light, the cracks in the monolith widening as beams of energy shot outward, illuminating the entire landscape beyond. The shadows shrieked. Silas felt their darkness retreating, dissolving in the face of the overwhelming brilliance. The hum crescendoed to a peak, reverberating through him until he thought he might split apart. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded. Silas collapsed to the floor, his body limp, his breath ragged. The hum had stopped. The chamber was silent. Slowly, he opened his eyes. The key was gone, the pedestal dark and lifeless. The cracks in the monolith had sealed, its surface smooth once more. Silas turned his head, his heart sinking. The girl lay motionless beside him. "No," he whispered, dragging himself toward her. "Come on, don't do this." Her markings were dim now, their glow barely visible. Silas lifted her gently, cradling her in his arms. Her silver eyes fluttered open, weak but alive. She looked at him, her lips parting as she whispered a single word: "Free." Silas swallowed hard, his vision blurring. "Yeah," he said softly, "you did it." The girl's eyes drifted closed, her body finally still. Silas held her for a long moment, the weight of everything crashing over him like a wave. When he finally looked up, the chamber had changed. The dark stone was warm now, faint light spreading through it like the first glow of dawn. Outside the monolith, the violet sky had softened, its bruised color replaced with a faint golden hue. The world was healing. Silas closed his eyes, his chest heaving as he whispered to the stillness, "You did it." And for the first time since he'd stepped into the jungle, the hum was gone. Peace had returned.